All right, so I'm getting back on the car. I haven't worked on it in a few months now, and I need to make some progress. So today I'm going to be going going through a laundry list of things I'm going to have to do, kind of work my way through it. Really three main phases to what I'm doing. The first one is I got to do the remainder of the prep prior to pulling down the rear frame rails. I put the inner rocker or inner convertible rocker in here. It's just temp fitted in here right now. It's too long still. I didn't cut the end off, or didn't cut this back end to length yet. But I'm just trying to get a general idea of the fitting. But that can happen later. That can happen after the rails are in and everything's kind of where it needs to be. I just needed to get the width figured out because of the flange on the bottom of the convertible rocker. Goes in between the rear torque box and the existing rocker in the car. So I've got that figured out. I've got my width, I trimmed it out, I've got everything clamped in place, and now the only thing I'm going to do is come in with a piece of angle iron, I cut the length. I'm going to put it in between the two rear torque boxes, tack it in on each side, probably three pretty decent tacks on each side, just to hold my relationship in the width there, so I don't have to worry about that dimension changing depending how I clamp against the walls or anything. And that way, once I get that done, then I'm going to have to drop the frame rails down. So I'm going to take those down, prep them for welding, where all the spot weld or all the grind marks are inside there. Kind of probably see little shine reflections in there. I have each one of them dotted with a Sharpie, so I have to go back and then strip the paint off those areas, and then probably maybe hit them with ball through primer just a little bit, and then get that ready to go back in. The other thing I have to do is inside these the rear torque boxes. I need to grind a little bit of where the weld is that I put in there. Kind of show some of that. So because they weren't really bent correctly for what I was doing, I had to split them here, slide it in a little bit, and re-weld it. So I'm going to have to grind off that. Grind it off, but just grind it down flush so it's flush with this top surface up here, so that when I slide the torque box, or sorry, the inner rocker, when I slide that hat channel shape in there, it's going to rest on the bottom part of that, and just so it slips in there and actually seats down flush. Because I don't really want an air gap under there, because obviously that's a place where moisture and things can collect. So I'd rather be as tight as possible. And then, so once I have that ground down, I'm gonna do that on the other side as well. This guy's got to come out anyway. This rail, it's just since it's just kind of temporary, lay it in there right now. And then I'm gonna, like I said, I'll drop the rails. I have to prep the outside of the flange that's at the bottom of that hooks up to the rocker. It's got where the sheet metal vice grips are, the duck bills. There's that flange gets pulled tight against there. Well, I can't weld that from the outside unless I drill through every layer of rocker. So I'd rather just drill some holes on the inside of it, and then maybe 3 or 4 holes, on both sides, just in that flange. That's this black flange is right up here. That's kind of hard to see with the jack in the way, but this guy here, drill some holes in there, and then that way I can do some pretty good spots through, tacks or spots, we're gonna call them, right through, and tie all the pieces together. And then once I've done that, I also need to strip, or while it's out, I also need to strip the outside of this bracket here along with this little L area here. Anything that's touching this has to be stripped, and then probably have some welted primer put on it, and possibly some holes drilled. Or I'm just not sure if I'm gonna weld around that perimeter yet or actually spot them. I'll probably weld around most of them, because there's not really any reason to spot if you can just put a nice heavy weld on there. And the only other thing that's kind of tricky on this one, I think I mentioned this in the last video, was that these things aren't the frame rails and torque boxes that you buy are just, there's a lot to be desired, left to be desired, I should say, on the quality. So this guy on this side, for instance, is actually pretty decent. Like this L here, or this little bend over, is touching the wall. This guy, which is the heavier gauge metal, comes and bends. Well, it's touching down in the bottom portion of it, but not at the top. But it's not a huge gap. I can fill that with weld, and I can make it. I can burn it in pretty well. That probably won't be a problem. But if I go to the passenger side, This guy, you know, like on the other side is touching, but this one is not. I mean, like, it's got a huge gap. So what I'm contemplating is bending the ear. So this guy right here, bend this ear in a smidge further. It's a technical term there. And so just tweak that in a little bit and then put a doubler inside here on this whole face. So I've already, you know, measured it. So do like a 6-inch long by 5.5-inch tall doubler and put that in there, weld that in, and then weld this to the doubler. That way it doesn't interfere with this flange here, but it just gives it a place to put that that's not gonna, or it's gonna, a way to beef that up. I don't think it really hurts anything at that point to do that because I still have my trimmed dimension, which is correct. I don't see how I can shift the whole body over or anything like, I'd say the body, you know, shift the rails. It's just, you know, obviously other things are hitting at the same time, so you're not gonna be able to go anywhere with it. But anyway, like I mentioned, you know, I gotta come in here and do the, you know, prep the rails once I get them down. The other thing I do wanna do is, I saw some videos of people doing this where, like on an existing rocker, you have your seatbelt tie-in here, and some of the newer style seatbelts have like the plastic sheath or whatever on them, and some of them work better than others depending where they are, whether it causes a tripping hazard or whatever, but also the geometry to the seat is the challenge. So what I want to do is probably take the location of this and install a second location back here, which will give me an option to have a seatbelt that comes at more of a you know, horizontal versus so straight up and down on me. And part of that's because I'm moving this point, you know, I'm moving this point in, obviously, because I'm adding the inner rockers. So it's going to get a little more severe. So I'm thinking if I come back here and install a hole right here and put another tie-in for a seatbelt back there, I'll probably be in a better shape. Fortunately, because I have the old floor, I can cut the seatbelt brackets off of here, the old seatbelt tie-ins. I can just cut them off there, strip them, make sure there's absolutely no rust on them or whatever. Probably soak them in that rust dissolver or something, and just make sure they're nice and clean, you know, the threads are good, so on and so forth, and then weld those in on the back side of the frame rails. So, or of these convertible rocker rails. So I should be able to come in here behind this and just install a second, you know, bracket right here. I mean, they used a pretty big beefy plate, which I would love to have that, but I just don't have any of that material. So, but I can just install those, you know, right here, and then that solves that problem and gives me somewhere else to put it. So I kind of think it's probably not a bad idea to give myself some more options, because worst case scenario, if I don't use them, they're gonna be covered up with carpet, you'll never see them again. So it doesn't really hurt anything. Then on the back end of the car, what I'm gonna have to do, I've got everything, of course I still have the tail panel clamped in. Eventually I'm going to weld that, but I haven't quite got to that point yet. I'm probably gonna end up welding the bottom of it first, obviously, and then the top I'm still negotiating how I'm going to address the quarters, but you know, and that has to do with those corner brackets. So I don't want to weld anything in solid until I know what I'm doing there, because otherwise I just have to grind off welds and just put on there. So, but back here, some of the stuff that I still need to address is where the frame rail comes back. The rail comes back. Let's see if I can see it here. Yeah. So when the rail comes to the back, it has a tab on each side of the end of the rail, and they're folded inward, and so they flush up against this face right where this little depression area is. And so I need to have spot, and you have basically four welds, and then same thing with the other side, 4 welds to tie the rail to the trunk brace. So I still have to do that. I did take a Sharpie and I marked the edges of the rail on each side. So once I get this thing out, I'll be able to look in there and say, okay, yeah, my rail's between here and here, and then I'll know where to drill the holes. So it shouldn't be too difficult, but then I can prep that for welding as well, clean it up, put some weld through primer on it. And then the only other thing I really need to do in here is I have to fill some of these holes that were from the original bumper brackets, because those bumper brackets were just garbage and they were too tall, so they didn't even fit into this opening, into this little gap here. So I had to drill them out when I got a little lazy and just drilled through the spot welds rather than just drilling the tops off. And so now I have holes to fill in the bottom. Now most of these holes tie into would tie into the rail below, so I can just leave them. But some of them, like this guy out here, it kind of misses, it only catches about half of the rail. so, or the flange of the rail, so I'd just rather fill it in. Same thing here. These are behind it, so there's nothing to weld to. So I'll fill those in. Same thing on the other side. I got 3 on that side as well. So anyway, and that's pretty much where it stands. So I'm going to get started doing some welding and removing parts. So now I'm going to try to remove the frame rails as an assembly out the bottom. I have to loosen the jacks at the back because they're supporting the extensions that go out towards the rear. They're not doing a whole lot of support, but because the frame rails actually tuck up inside the trunk or the trunk brace across there. There's a little pocket in there. They kind of sit up in there. So what I'll do is I'll loosen these two, get them out of the way, and then lower the front tube maybe slightly, and then start scooching the thing forward and get it forward a little bit, and then try to slowly bring it down. I put some cardboard down just to keep it from really smacking on the ground, but I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of control over that once it actually starts to come down. So. Not terribly graceful, but effective, I guess. That's a lovely noise. So first thing I'll do is, I guess, just grind those welds to get them flush. Earplugs are a must on this because it's so ridiculously loud. You'll blow them out or whatever. So anyway, let's see. The goal is not to remove all the weld, just take the high spots off so that the stuff sits flush. Otherwise, you'll remove a lot of the strength of the weld. Alright, so that's the main bulk of the rear torque box attach areas, and so I can weld on the sides. If I decide to weld on top, it's fine. And so I've still got to do the spot weld holes, and then I've got to do the obviously spot weld holes in the back, and clean up all the dots. Okay, so I got everything sanded that I wanted sanded for now. I'm going to come in here and start applying weld-through primer on all the surfaces that are going to be hidden. Anything that might have a weld going through it or where panels might be trapped together. Did the same thing there. Obviously, I cleaned up the edge. That's going to get weld through primer on both sides. I don't know. I'll contemplate whether I'm going to spray on tops of those where I have them all paired metal, just because it's easier to know where you are if you see a shiny thing through the hole, but it just depends how big the bare spot is, because you don't want to leave too much unprotected metal in between that layer, or it could technically rust. So I may end up just dusting those with weld through primer as well. And then on the back of the car, pull the camera real quick. On the back of the car, I did clean up and knock the holes through where the frame rail ties in. So those are, on both sides. They've been marked and drilled, and so they're ready for spot welds there when I put the rails back in. I still have to weld closed the holes that I had accidentally knocked in, which is these guys here, those two, and that one over there, and then same thing the other side, the three. And then that back end should be ready for the rail to go back in. Inside, as you can see, I stripped the paint off in the back portion of the rocker there, because I wasn't really sure where that thing was going, or where I didn't really mark it as well as I was hoping, I guess, what was in there to know exactly what part to sand out. So I figured I'd over sand. I'll just spray it with weld through primer back in there. And same thing along the top and bottom of the rocker where the butt welds, or no, sorry, where the spot welds will be. I've bared that metal as well, just because I'm going to then go back and hit it with weld through primer, because the paint that was on there, I believe, was epoxy primer, so it's not going to weld through that very well. So I just wanted to clean that, clean it out, make sure it only has weld through primer between there, and then spray it back on again. And then over here, that's where I'm going to put my doubler down on the bottom. I've got that already cut, so that's just going to be a piece. I'm going to paint this front and back also with weld through primer, and then that piece will go right back in that back edge there and provide that extra little distance that I have to make up because those rails aren't perfect. And then of course I cleaned up the front as well, where the rails will come through as well, where the convertible rails come through. And then the other thing, I did cut the hole through here. It's a little rough right now. The paint's a little crappy. I got to clean that up a little bit. But but I've got the hole there. The rail fits nice and tight through there, so I think it'll work out pretty well. And then, so anyway, I'm on to basically painting some stuff, and then I'll have to give it half an hour or something to set up well. It says 15 minutes on the can at 3M weld through 2 primer. So I'm gonna try this stuff out. I think I've used the Eastwood stuff before, but for some reason they're on massive back order for the past 6 months. I can't get it anymore. So I'm trying that one for the heck of it, and so I'll give that a shot, spray it, and then try to get these rails back up inside and start tacking everything into spot, and then start welding stuff in solid. So be good to get that done, and then eventually obviously have to hold the floor down or the trunk pan down and start welding all those. I'm assuming I'm just going to start from the middle, start working my way out, and kind of go from there. So that's where it is. Okay, so I've got the rear frame rails and cross member and everything sprayed with some weld through primer. I also sprayed the ends of the torque boxes on each side where it touches up against the side of the rocker panels. I sprayed the rocker panels in the back there on the driver's side. I painted that whole area. It's pretty much solid, and then up here I just did 2 stripes running down, just where the convertible rocker will actually made up. And then on this side, obviously, I painted pretty much the entire rail. But if I can get the camera on there, yeah. So that back area, I'm going to take this little beef up piece here, and yeah, it's already dry. So I'll take this guy and install it right in here. Weld it in, one weld in each hole. And then once that's in place, then I can get the frame members and bring it back under and try to lift it back up into place, and then clamp everything. Start checking some dimensions just to make sure I'm exactly where I want to be, and then I can start welding to the rails. What I'm going to have to do is probably feed the convertible rocker. The passenger side one, I'll feed it through just to give me a shim at, basically the offset at the bottom that I'm going to be needing. And then on the other side, I'm just going to take that little scrap piece I have from cutting the end off. I'm going to shove it in behind it, so it's taking up that gap. That way I can still weld the one ear that actually touches when that's installed. So so that'll at least make sure I get my spacing right, because I don't want to weld it up and then not be able to fit the rubber rocker in there. So so I'm going to get with this, get to this side first and start welding this, and then go from there. Alright, so that clamp's in place, just going to weld all the holes closed, and probably have to stop and hammer it a little bit because this one's a little bit out, a little spacing there. Pinch that in. Alright, should give me a nice beef up. Plus the spacing for the extra thickness that I need. Alright, so during the process I kind of wised up a little bit and went to the 4.5 inch grinder. The belt sander works pretty good on some little things, but when the bead, if you get too lumpy of a bead or too tall of an area, it wants to slip off the side. So it's good for hitting like spot welds when you're trying to take them out, but maybe not as good on this. So hit that, just kind of smooth it out. I'm going to recoat it lightly with the weld through primer, and then after it cools off here for a few minutes, and then try to start putting the rails back up inside the car. So take them to that point. So what I've got to do is position it to where I can raise the rear portions of the floor up, stick them up into their pockets. It's only going to go about halfway into the pocket though, because of the way that bottom lip is. It can't quite make the turn and hang all the way to the ground. So I'm going to have to get those fed up there into that hole, and then raise it, and then throw my jack stands back under just to start getting the height figured out again. So I've got all the primer, or all the weld through primer in place now. I re-welded or re-primed that one just so it's clean looking, and it's protected in between the two. And I gotta go take it back up. So let me see if I can get that to go where it's supposed to go. car really moves around quite a bit right now because I don't have any jack stands on the back, so the front is what's keeping it. So obviously the straps in the air are about the only thing keeping it from coming down. So now I'm trying to get this guy to come up in place. Let's see what I can do here. Getting close there. Check the back again, make sure it's actually seated all the way. Which I should just be able to look through the holes on the back of where I drilled for my spot welds to see if it's actually touching, which it does appear to be touching. So that's good. Looks like it's crooked here. Alright, so one thing I do have to do to make sure is that I'm lined up on my alignment lines underneath the car so that I can guarantee that I get my 43-inch dimension side to side. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now. Yeah, it's pretty good. Alright, that's nice. Let me get a tray on there if you measure it. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to check this one at the front to make sure it's where it's supposed to be. Which it should be, because it's only ever it's been welded in. Alright. Yep, I'm still 37. It's like I should be, that's good. Now I gotta set my tram up for the 43-inch dimension on the back, just to make sure that's not shifted at all. Alright, so I've got that dimension. Now, just to check it under the back end here. It looks good. Or it should be. Awesome. Okay. So with that dimension in there, and that one there, I just need to check height to see if I'm where I was intending to be. Looks pretty good, actually. Bottoms look rough where they should be, which is nice. So I'm seated. And that, nice, okay. The next thing to check would be my width across here to make sure I haven't pushed too much. I think probably need to pull the lower portion of it in towards each other. So now I'm going to take this little cutoff piece, I'm going to stick it back inside the inner edge here. This is not the right one for this position, but I'm just using it for spacing, for the sake of spacing. So I can maintain the distance from that flange to the wall. Good, okay. So then when I draw it in a little bit, it'll pinch that gap. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, but I'll use the full rail on that side just because I don't have another one cut down like that. So once I have that installed in there, it's filling that gap that's going to naturally be there when I actually install these for real. And so now I'm just going to take a set of vice grips and pull it down tight. There we go. See, it's moved a little bit, so that's good. So it's seating. So now that's sturdy. I'll do the same thing on this side as well. I think we're there. Everything looks pretty good. So now I just need to tack this guy to keep it from moving while I get everything else. Well, tack that in a couple spots and then start moving some clamps out of the way. Kind of go from there. All right. Weld through primer, it's good to have it on there, but then once you get to where you're about to weld, you can brush off anything that's exposed, because if it's exposed, it means you can get to it later with paint to coat it. So it's just going to be kind of one added contaminant you probably don't necessarily want in the weld. So I'm kind of just brushing off some of these areas ahead of time just so they're as clean as possible. spike screws off. All right, so I went to change my welding wire on my machine here, and I discovered that buying MIG wire from Amazon is apparently an incredibly terrible idea. So bought this Hobart wire, which is, yeah, decent wire. So this is a 30 thousandths wire. I'm gonna try that. I got 24 and 30. But anyway, here's why it's a terrible idea. So apparently they just absolutely tossed this thing back when I ordered it 6 months, 8 months ago or whatever. So they broke the spool. So I am completely hosed. So that one is certainly not gonna work. And the other one, the 24, is also broken. So that's freaking awesome. So, and it becomes a problem because the wire is going to hang up on these edges that are bent in. There's no way it's going to pull without hanging up at some point in time. So that is not, I mean, look at that snag thing that's sticking out there. And I mean, I really can't do anything with it. You know, you try to bend it out of the way, it doesn't want to stay, or it just takes a big chunk out of it and leaves a sharp edge. So pretty well screwed. So I'm going to be, I guess, going somewhere to buy some wire. Probably not today because it's Saturday evening or whatever, but I will try tomorrow somewhere if anybody's open, which they may not be because it's the first of the year. So there's not going to be a welding shop open, but you know, maybe Lowe's or somebody has some. I'll have to take a look. So anyway, that puts me at a complete hold at this point. I mean, I've gotten some of it welded in, so it's not going to go anywhere, but I really wanted to get more welding done, and that's just not going to happen. So until tomorrow. All right, so Lowe's did not have 30 thousandths welding wire, so I ended up going to Home Depot. They have some Lincoln wire there. It's a 12.5 pound spool. You can actually see that the wire is there's more of it wrapped around here because the Hobart ones I think are 10 pound spools. So you have a little additional, because you have a larger diameter wire, I think it beefs up this, so if you did deflect it a little bit, you may not crack as easily as that one where it's sticking out sticking out pretty far on the edge there. So it's really leaving itself pretty vulnerable. The other thing is that the construction of this, if you look at it, it is pretty thin. I mean, it's not even an eighth of it. Maybe, if you're lucky, an eighth of an inch thick in the interior, and it only has radial ribs, whereas the Lincoln one they're a little bit shorter, the ribs, but it seems like the reel itself, the body of it is actually thicker, and it has the crosshatch, which is going to give you rigidity in two directions rather than just radially. Because as you can see on this one, it cracked pretty much along, coming out from the center, which would kind of steer you to believe that these are the weakest parts in these webs here. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. Additionally, I may be changing my gun. I'm not certain yet. I'm gonna have to, check that, look into a little more. I think the coil, the little spring sleeve, the liner that's inside here, this guy here, I I think it's got either a kink or a bend in it about 2 feet, 2.5 feet before the end where the gun is, because I went to refeed some string of wire through it, and it just kind of hung up. So I just stopped. Basically, I kept hitting like a hard stop, and I couldn't get it to feed through. I even took the gun off the end stripped it down. Still couldn't feed it through. Had to pull it back out again, straighten the wire, make sure it was perfectly straight, and then jiggle it a bunch of times, and then manage to get it to go through. So I think there's something kinked in there. So I really, just to save myself trouble in the future, I may end up just changing that liner or changing the gun. The liner is only like 40 something bucks. The gun is like 240 bucks, I think, on Cyberweld. Definitely not buying from Miller because they want like 370 or something for it. But so it's an M100 gun. So I'm not really sure if I'm gonna, how I'm gonna go about that yet. But either way, I'm gonna have to wait for some parts to come in probably. But I'm going to try to run this 30 thousandths wire through here first. I gotta flip my roller. So flip that around in order to be on the 30 thousandths groove instead of the 24, and then try to run it through and see what happens, and go from there. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully everything works out.